Welcome to Monday Night Live, coming to you as usual from the studio of the Public Media Network, where every voice matters. I say that every week, have been doing so for some years now, and it's still true. I think of myself as one of the luckiest people in Kalamazoo, because week after week I sit at this table and we have guests who know what they're doing, are contributing to the community, making a real impact on the community, and tonight is no exception. We're going to be talking to David Baldwin. We're going to be talking about Fontana Chamber Arts. But before I introduce him formally, I have, as usual, to put one or two thoughts on the table. The main thought that I have is that music really can unite a community. Music has a language all its own. It can talk to old and young, but too often music can divide old from young. If you go to the Metropolitan Opera in New York, Grand Opera, I've been there just once. I got a single ticket on one trip, on a business trip, to an opening night, and I wondered what I should wear, so I wore a suit. On my right was a lady wearing a long black frock and a diamond tiara. Her husband was in dinner jacket, not full evening dress. And on my left was a 30-year-old fellow wearing jeans and an open neck shirt. And so that was an interesting spread. But on the whole, it was a pretty well-kept audience wearing good clothes and probably good watches. And the young people were in a minority. If you see this crowd in New York at the Met or at Studio 10, when the live performance is shown in a cinema, it's still an older, upper middle class crowd on the whole. It's a pity, because sitting across the table from me is somebody who is bringing old and young together. Older, I shouldn't say old, people are probably already insulted if they're regular Fontana devotees. Older people and younger people together, making a real effort to liven things up and still keep the quality at its highest. When I was courting a young woman who became my wife, her father confronted the pair of us on one occasion and said, "You know, you kids," and I was about 22 at the time, "you kids, I don't understand your music. It's so frivolous." And I said, "I can understand that. In your generation, I know it was quite different. You sang, I believe there was one very popular song which sang, 'We all walked the wibbly-wobbly walk, we all talked the wibbly-wobbly talk, we winked at all the pretty girls with wibbly-wobbly eyes,' and aged party retreated. We don't want aged people to retreat. We want them to advance. We want them to mingle with younger people and enjoy the same kind of music. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Don't miss a minute. Don't reach for that remote control. Bill, could we have a broad shot? We have instant broad shot. You are now on view to all the people in Kalamazoo and Portage and you name it. David J. Baldwin, Executive and Artistic Director, Fontana Chamber Arts. Thank you for giving us a Monday evening.
Thank you for having me.
Well,
to be here.
We are going to help to promote Fontana.
Sure.
But you're a busy guy.
Right.
And evenings are probably in short supply. And,
particularly weekends, yeah.
Yes, weekends, yes. So you're giving us one. Thank you very much. Did I talk rubbish? Or does music divide? Or
I can see both sides of it. As soon as you said that, the first thing I thought about was back in 9/11. I was living in London at the time. I was managing musicians, and two of my clients were to perform that night.
9/11?
Yeah, on 9/11. Hélène Grimaud, the pianist, and Christoph Eschenbach, the conductor. And to show in a way that, and what I truly feel that music primarily unites. that evening, Christoph had changed the entire program to start off with the Barber Adagios for strings. So it was kind of a nod to an important American composer. And the entire Royal Albert Hall, which was completely full, just to see the unity that existed within this group on that fateful day, a horrible day, was pretty amazing. And just to see how people reacted.
Yes.
And I remember reading subsequently, around the country, the New York Philharmonic, for instance, gave a free concert, and more people came out for that concert than they ever had for anything else.
Yes.
So it was, and there's something about classical music too. I think that its depth and its meaningfulness, people seek in those kinds of times. At the same time, I can certainly see the divisive aspect of it when you look at generation to generation. So my parents' generation were there for the sort of coming of age of the Beatles or Elvis. And my grandparents, who had been brought up on Frank Sinatra and Mitch Miller's sing-alongs, I'm sure found that just vile music. Or even my great-grandparents, who would see the Rat Pack and look at their kind of lifestyles, these lavish, glamorous lifestyles, as and they were depression people, feeling that. So, and I think it goes all the way back. If you look back to Beethoven, when he was making his transition from the classical to the Romantic period, I'm sure there were lots of people in this generational divide that saw his Romanticism as barbaric, or at least distasteful, at any rate. So it's been going on for years and years and years.
It's not a new thing.
No, it's definitely not a new thing.
And I suspect that some of us, we've all been young.
Right.
I was young once.
Sure.
Way back. I think sometimes we deliberately want our own music. We want something that our elders don't approve of.
I think the generation intentionally chooses their form of music in order to rebel against the generation before, or whatever, to annoy them at the very least. But I think what's interesting is I think some of that is changing in the current generation. And I don't know if the iPod is responsible for this, but there's so much music available to us, and it's just so easily and instantly accessible, that I think this cross-genre thing that's going on, and I find it with myself certainly, yes, my iPod is primarily populated with classical and jazz music, but I have gospel and country and bluegrass and world music and all sorts of stuff, maybe even some pop stuff. That I'm reminded of a quote that Duke Ellington had, and he said there are two kinds of music. There's good music, and then there's the rest. And that's sort of how I feel, and I feel that maybe this generation is feeling that way as well. A lot of the artists that we have coming up next season were, steeped in the traditional classical music training, but have gone on to do all sorts of other things, whether it be jazz or bluegrass or country. So they have that solid foundation, but they also have other interests, and it's much more eclectic.
So anyway, you are executive and artistic director.
Yes.
I usually say to people, tell us all about your education or what have you, but tell us about London, because you don't just know who the good musicians are. You've got contacts that reach back a long way. You're on first name terms with probably hundreds of excellent performers.
Sure.
But you know something about the business of music.
Yeah,
you were in
London
with a
big management agency called ICM at the time.
A big management agency.
Yes.
So it wasn't just about music, it was getting them and making it profitable and finding the right...
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the whole business of the business of music.
Right.
It doesn't just happen, it might happen. Somebody at a party takes his guitar along, but the kind of thing we have here, it takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of thought, takes a lot of contacts, persistence.
It takes, on the musician's part, it takes a lot of talent. And
don't be modest.
And the agent's part, it takes a lot of hard work and a grind. I mean, it depends. I worked with both very, very seasoned musicians who had major international careers already, as well as some very young artists who now do. So if you look at a pianist like Jonathan Biss, or a cellist like Elisa Weilerstein, or a lot of young people that I worked with at the very beginning, like when they were in their teens, that we had signed on to the agency, and they've now gone on to, you know, great careers. But then I was also fortunate enough to work with people like Wynton Marsalis, or Yefim Bronfman, or Leon Fleischer, or Garrick Olson, who were very well established, you know, in their careers, and I was able to help that along.
Now you play?
I do. I'm a pianist. But I don't play professionally or perform. I just play for myself, really.
Was that part of your education, or
Yeah,
was it something you picked up when you were
Yeah, I did
8
a
years old?
degree at the Curtis. Well, I first started just playing by ear when I was about 4 or 5.
Oh,
Yeah, and then I took lessons, you know, all the way through school, and then eventually I did a degree at the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia.
you know what you're talking about, and you understand
I'm
music.
comfortable, yeah.
Yes, yes. Modesty again. Let's continue this unity thing for a moment, not just old and young. Jake Stuckey, there's a Jake Stuckey Foundation,
Right.
his daughters.
Correct.
They sponsor one of the programs each year, I think.
Yes.
Jake was a friend. He was with Upjohn.
Sure.
He was running research,
Right.
and I was in corporate and got to know him and respect for him. And then I joined an old man's discussion group, and he was a member of that. He, I think, did some uniting. I think there were at one time 2
There were
chamber music
two
organizations in
different.
Kalamazoo.
So you had Fontana, which was more of this summer festival that existed out in Shelbyville, in an old beat-up house.
No air conditioning,
Yep,
but ice
that
cream.
would be it. It
Ice
was always
cream in the
plain well
interval.
ice cream, yeah. And then we had the Chamber Music Society of Kalamazoo, which had been here for a good 40 years prior to that. But in 2000, Jake, I think, spearheaded it, but a lot of other people were involved, like Bill Maxey.
Bill Maxey is still very much involved.
Still very much involved, yeah. Great supporter of ours. The 2 organizations started to almost compete with one another, and I think that there was a growing interest from the foundations in town that what they did was just too similar in nature, that why not see what we can do about, you know, merging these 2 organizations and just making one bigger organization.
Because they were fighting for the same audience.
Yeah, and you know,
Really?
Fontana started, so they had started as a summer music festival, but then they started to present kind of quartets during the year. Well, that's what the Chamber Music Society did, and so
Okay.
there started to be a conflict and a competition
I
that
can
was
understand it.
unnecessary.
It makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep,
If not conflict, at least questioning.
sure.
Do we really need that upstart
Some territory.
organization?
Issues, yeah. Right.
So Jake worked on,
Jake worked tirelessly on putting those 2 organizations in and lobbying each of the individual boards, which at the time were many of whom were rather resistant to the idea of doing so. And he and Bill Maxey did a great job at putting those 2 things together and creating this current organization.
yes. And why am I guessing? If it hadn't happened, neither might have survived.
That would be questionable
was-
whether they could
it
have,
was
especially
undercutting.
after 2008, if they were supposed to go through those, you know, economic hardships during those years. I think it would have been pretty difficult.
Yes. So who did the summer festival?
So that was Neil Saunders. He's the one who.
Neil Sanders,
Yeah.
Shelbyville.
He did Shelbyville.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
then there was no professional organization. It was all board-driven. It was just a volunteer basis for the Chamber Music Society in town.
Yes.
So there was no organization per se. It was just this.
Yes, Shelbyville, which I thoroughly enjoyed, particularly when they got air conditioning.
Sure. That was thanks to Irving Gilmore, I believe.
Yes, a lot of things, thanks
Right.
to Uncle Irving. I don't remember going out to Shelbyville many visiting artists. It was a lot of local talent. I think.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it
we
was
have some good
mostly-
local talent.
Mostly Neil's friends. It was
Yes.
that true kind of chamber music sort of experience where, and they could have been from Europe, they could have been Western professors. They ran the gamut really,
Yes.
but they were very much almost like what do you want to say? A local group that played together quite often and really knew each other musically and personally.
Yes,
And
which helps.
yes, it does.
It
Certainly,
helps.
it does.
Yeah, I've often wondered how
It wasn't just
you
like this
managed
pick
without
up
a
random
conductor.
group. Yeah, no, they really knew each other.
They must be able
Yeah.
to relate.
Right.
And being friends and playing together over the years helped. It was good music.
Sure.
And it was my first experience of chamber music.
Okay.
In London at college, I could go to all kinds of
Orchestra.
grand stuff. The
Sure.
Albert Hall you talked about. I mean, that.
You don't do
pulls in
chamber
the
music in the Albert Hall.
No, no, no. And the last night of the proms,
Right.
I went twice. You had to camp out
Yeah,
from maybe 8 o'clock the evening before,
absolutely.
sleeping on the pavement. There wasn't much sleeping. There were people with guitars and what have you.
Still the same.
And get in to stand in the promenade. You've been up all night. You're standing in the promenade.
Like the cattle, right?
But what an
But
evening.
it's wonderful.
All the youngsters in the corral and all the
Yes.
people who had
Hoi
tickets
polloi,
for months on the stands. Okay, so there was a summer and there was a winter. Now, Fontana has
Both.
summer season and winter season.
Yes.
And mainly what we're going to be talking about tonight is the season that's about to start. So the
This is
Summer
the
season.
2015-16
15-16.
season. So they, at Fontana, call it the winter season. I call it the subscription series.
because
it's-
people can actually subscribe, they can buy a
Exactly.
packet of. We're not
Right.
allowed on the program to say it costs so much a ticket and what have you.
Right.
But we can say the prices are reasonable, the venues are great, they've been chosen carefully, and you can buy packages for the whole.
And it's a
season.
series of 8 concerts that goes on from September through May.
Okay, so we'll be mainly talking about September through May,
Yes.
but there's one concert coming up in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes, our last concert this season are members of the Marsalis family. So there's the famed New Orleans jazz family, Wynton Marsalis being one of them, Branford Marsalis being another. Their brother, Delphio Marsalis, who's a trombonist, and their father, who's the patriarch of the family, who's a legendary jazz pianist, are joined by a bassist and a percussionist and drummer in the Delphio Marsalis quartet, and
Yes.
that is Friday, April 17th.
And are there still tickets available, do you think?
Still a few, yeah, still a few
Okay.
left.
So it's not too late to call 269-382-7774 or www.fontanachamberarts.org.
Yes.
Where else are the tickets available?
Also in the office.
In the office?
Yep. We have
On
our
the
own
second
office.
floor of the
Epic.
Epic Centre,
Yes.
right here?
Yep.
Not through Miller?
No,
Not through Miller.
no,
So keep it local.
right.
Keep it downtown.
Sure.
Nurture the centre.
That's right.
The last Southern Gentleman is a jazz group. Now, when you talk about New Orleans, I've been there several times, and what's that old hall? Gospel Hall or something? It used to cost.
Preservation Hall, you thinking?
I can't remember.
Probably Preservation Hall.
Preservation, that's right. Preservation Hall. You could get in for $1
Yes, all
at
right.
one time, and I saw the price going up as I visited.
I'm sure.
And people stood, and then as people left, you went and sat on benches. The music was just hypnotic.
Amazing, yeah,
Now, that was what I call traditional jazz.
right.
What about this group coming on the 17th?
It's definitely traditional jazz. It's
Tradition.
different than Preservation Hall. They also have their own local or in-house jazz band. That can tend to be more Dixieland type
Okay.
of stuff, and this is not. This is more steeped in the standards of the sort of Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong
Okay.
vein, with its own take.
Yeah, I saw Sweet Alice there.
Okay.
She was the sourest looking lady I think I've ever seen, but they called her Sweet Alice.
Right.
But anyway, enough.
Right.
This season is finishing
So
on the
that'll be
17th.
the last concert on April 17th.
But they'll see the
yeah.
Marsalis Patriarch
Yes,
and good traditional jazz.
Yes.
Not Dixieland, traditional jazz.
correct.
Okay, got it. Enough of that. On with the new.
Right.
8 programs?
Yes, between September and May.
Venues. Let's start with venues, because I think this is one of the keys to that chamber, that close feeling.
Right. So the only two venues that we have Dalton Center Recital Hall at Western Michigan University for 6 of the concerts. No, sorry, 5 of the concerts. Then we have Stetson Chapel at Kalamazoo College for 2 of the concerts.
Acoustics are good now.
Wonderful acoustics.
They weren't
yeah.
until they put that
Yeah, no, they
thing, and now
really
it-
fixed that, yeah.
If they do the same at the Civic,
Right,
we
right.
enough of that.
Right. And then our last concert is a collaboration with the Gilmore International Keyboard Festival, which is Taylor Eichsty, and that will be at Bell's Brewery in the Eccentric Cafe there.
Oh,
So
now that's interesting because
yeah, it'll be fun.
you don't normally see the older crowd in the Eccentric Cafe.
Well, there are 2 sets there. So there's one at 6:30 and then there's another one at 9 o'clock. So it probably appeals to
Old people
different
go
crowds,
early
I'm
to bed.
guessing, but you never know, you know.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Right.
Because that's the last of the
It
season.
is the last, yeah.
We'll do it in sequence if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Thank you for bringing video and stills
Sure.
and your knowledge of these people. I think many of them you can call them by their first name. You know them.
I know a lot of them, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Although some of these next season are new, and in fact, 6 of the 8 artists have never been to Kalamazoo before. And even though they're really well known, whether it be at Carnegie Hall or San Francisco or Berlin or London or wherever, they haven't been here. And I'm particularly proud of that. I'm excited to introduce them to this community because I think they'll really resonate.
Yes. Now, you've seen that before. You've brought in people who have never been here.
Yeah.
How did they like the Kalamazoo audiences?
They loved it. I mean, this past season, we had this one particular concert, which was Jordi Savall, who plays the viola da gamba, which is sort of a
Hold it between your
medieval
knees,
cello.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. And we had people coming from all over the place, a lot of students from not only Western and K or whatever, but from Chicago, from Northwestern, from Indianapolis, tons of kids from Michigan State and the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And here's this guy playing, 17th to 18th century solo, essentially cello music, I guess, if you will. And they just came out of the woodwork for it, and it was really amazing. And that's the first time. I mean, this guy has been at the top of his game for 30, 40 years. He's been performing since the 70s on a really high level. He'd never been here before, and they really responded. They really
Must have been satisfying for the older members of the audience
It
to
was.
see how the younger people were enthusiastic.
And a lot of them came to me, even other prominent members of the heads of music organizations said, "Where did you find these people?" I said, "I didn't find them, they found us." But
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it was interesting.
And you do, there's some mingling. You don't mingle with the performers before the performance, that's
No,
a
but
bit
af-
off-putting, but
yeah.
afterwards.
After all of our performances, the artists have been very generously, freely giving of their time, whether it's signing CDs or autographs or just chats, and we always have sort of a wine and cheese kind of post-concert reception out in the lobby.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's all part of a whole. The beauty of chamber music, whether it's high classical
Sure.
or the moldable one, let's call
Right,
it that,
right.
is the proximity. You're so close
It's
to the act
intimacy, yeah,
that
certainly.
you know that you can actually affect the performance
Yeah.
by your enthusiasm, your applause,
Or your lack thereof.
just their
certainly
concentration.
Can affect it, yeah.
You really can pull the best out of those people because you're part of it.
Right.
It beats Apple, iPhone, iPad, and
Which-
Grand Opera.
Exactly, that just doesn't exist.
If you're in the back of the Met or the back of Miller Auditorium,
Right.
you really are not going to have much impact
No,
on those guys on the stage.
no.
But in a chamber situation, you're part of it.
You can and you
You
do.
almost feel like a musician yourself, even though I failed part one of piano.
Right.
You didn't. You play piano.
Yes, I play piano.
You play piano well.
I don't play it as well as I should, but.
Or did.
Or did, yeah.
And how did you learn to play?
Well, I first learned just by ear, just by hearing songs on the radio or whatever my parents were listening to, and I was able to sort of replicate that. And so they thought, okay, well, maybe he has some kind of
Kid's
natural
gonna be okay.
inclination. Yeah, so then I just started taking lessons, and it went on from there. I went to Juilliard Pre-College, and then eventually to Curtis.
It's got a pedigree. You're very modest.
Uh,
Okay, so let's get down to, we start at the beginning, which I believe is going to be Cecile McLaurin.
Salvant.
Thank you
Yes.
for doing that. I hesitated when I saw Salvant.
Yes, so Cecile McLaurin Salvant is a young jazz singer. She has been likened by the New York Times to be sort of the heir apparent or carrying the mantle of Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. She's really that good. She's only 25. She's performed all over the world, has even toured with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra in both the United States and in Europe. She's got an interesting background. She is originally from Miami. She was born to a Haitian father and a French mother, and studied, here's another example of what we were talking about earlier, studied classical piano and classical voice all the way up, and then she went to college in Aix-en-Provence in France, and was studying political science and Baroque voice. And 2 years into her studies, switched over to jazz. A year later, won one of the most prestigious jazz competitions in the world, the Thelonious Monk competition. And 5 years later, she's here, and she's performed at Carnegie Hall, has been nominated for a Grammy Award. I mean, it's really quite prodigious. She's quite amazing.
I think you made a big point there. You know, we assume that jazz is kind of random. People, fine, we seem to fit in with other people, but what you're saying is there's a very definite structure when you're a classical musician. And you can move into jazz and see the structure there. Without it, it wouldn't work, would it?
Sure, sure.
It isn't just haphazard.
No, there's nothing haphazard about it. You know,
No.
there are forms and definitions as well,
Yes,
and,
yes,
and
yes.
ways of doing things. Yeah.
So this is a real catch to get this lady to come to
Yes,
little
it'll
old Kalamazoo.
be her Kalamazoo debut, so I'm very
Kalamazoo
excited.
debut.
Yes.
Well, maybe. Bill out there has a photograph of her on the screen.
I think we have a clip that we can listen to as well.
We have a
This is
clip.
a Rodgers and Hart
If
piece.
Bill can find that video,
Yep,
we hear some music.
great.
Bill, could
I didn't know what time it was. Then I met you. Oh, what a lovely time it was. How sublime it was too. I did not know what day it was. You held my hand, warm like the month of May it was, and I'll say it was grand, grand. To be alive, to be young, to be mad, to be yours alone. Grand to see your face, hear your voice, feel your touch. Say I'm all your own. I did not know what year it was. Life was no prize. I wanted love, and there it was, shining out of your eyes. I'm wise, and I know what time it is now.
it's quite something.
So you can see very much of that school that she's coming from, that Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah
Yes,
Vaughan,
Billie Holiday, if you've
It's-
mentioned that.
Yeah.
There must be a crowd out there who'd
Right.
come and
yeah.
see the-
It's the
Billie
treatment
Holiday.
of the lyrics and
Yes,
just the
yes.
vocal stylings, and she's really terrific.
That seemed to be taking place in New York.
That was, yeah,
The-
Jazz
the-
at Lincoln Center on
Lincoln
Columbus
Center,
Circle.
it's a new
It is.
You're
It's an
looking at-
amazing space. It's
You look
really-
out on the traffic going around in the
Correct.
roundabout,
Yeah,
and she's going to be in little old Kalamazoo
that she will.
on the
11th of September,
11th of September,
and that's at Dalton Center Recital Hall.
Dalton
in
Center
Western.
Recital Hall. Starts at 8 o'clock, 8 p.m.,
Yep.
and a treat in store for anybody, whether they buy single tickets, pairs of tickets, or the package for the whole 8
All
concerts.
are available. Yep.
And of course, there are student tickets, which are
Correct.
heavily discounted,
Yes.
to get that younger group in.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to this idea of unification,
Right.
and that's the first concert of the 15-16 season.
Correct.
We finished the
14-15.
14-15
Right.
season, and we're going on to the next year.
Yep.
When did you start planning all this?
2 years ago, I
2
think,
years ago.
when I first arrived.
Yes, yes.
In June of 13, all of 13-14 was obviously done before
Yes,
I got here.
yes.
So I did all of this past season, 14-15, and you start working really on 15-16.
2 years
at least
ahead.
2 years in advance.
Because these people are heavily booked.
Exactly.
If they're in Australia on a Thursday, they're not going to be here on a
No,
Friday
not
night.
so much.
Okay. Bill, keep us moving. Keep us moving. The next concert will
Is
be
the
on the
Jerusalem Quartet,
the
and that's
Jerusalem.
on October 10th of
October 10th?
2015, and that will take place at Stetson Chapel,
Stetson Chapel.
Kalamazoo College. Yeah.
Jerusalem Quartet. Where are they from?
They're from Jerusalem, and they've been together at least 20 years, probably 20 plus years. They're a terrific young quartet. Also have not been here before. I know, it was interesting, I was just thinking earlier, that the violist who's in the group, I was a student with at Tanglewood over 20 years ago, about 23 years ago. He and I were students together, and Dan Guston, who's now the head of the Gilmore here.
Yes.
Was
He was
the
running
head
that.
of, yeah, he was running Gilmore,
Yes.
was running Tanglewood at the time. So I never would have guessed 23 years later that we would be reunited in Kalamazoo, but here we are.
Maybe you can put the great people who do this in a very small room. You probably all know one another.
Yeah, it's
The
a
people
pretty
who
small
can
world.
handle Tanglewood
Right.
or Fontana concerts
Sure.
have a lot in common.
Yeah.
They can get together and show their wounds. And
Yeah, now the music world is definitely a very small world.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So, place to know people, high and low. Jerusalem Quartet, thanks for the still, Bill. Let's have the video if we could. Again, easy on the ear.
Yeah.
Although when I look at we have Haydn, whom I used to call Hayden.
Right.
Haydn, you've got to be careful with these string quartet in G major. Bartok can be
Yes.
challenging.
I don't think his quartets are maybe as challenging as some of his other music might be perceived
Okay.
as, but it's all good stuff. And they're closing with the Dvorak, the Great American Quartet, which is quite
String
familiar to
quartet
most
number
people.
12 in F major.
Right.
Oh, yes, American. So
Yes.
come on, folk, rally to the
That's right.
American flag.
Right.
Moving right along, we're going to cover all the programs. Chris Tile,
Chris Thiele.
Thiel, thank you.
Thiele.
You see, I might have come and really put my foot
That's
in it
all
by
right.
saying, wasn't Thiel wonderful?
Right.
Chris
Thiele.
Thiel, Thile.
Right.
Mandolin, October 30th. Mandolin. This little thing?
Exactly. He's
And
this amazing
where is it?
virtuoso.
Dalton Center.
This will be at Dalton as well.
It's not huge, but will a mandolin fill it?
It'll be amplified.
It'll be
Certainly.
amplified.
Yeah, you can't do that acoustically. It'll be amplified in a very tasteful way so that it
course.
feels as acoustic as possible.
Yes,
but
yes,
yeah,
yes.
you're right. It's too big a space for a solo mandolin. He's an amazing, amazing virtuoso. Again, here's another example of someone who grew up very much with a classical background, but also played bluegrass his entire life. His family, he was involved with his family's band called Nickel Creek, and then eventually created another band, which was more of this kind of garage band-esque type of thing, called the Punch Brothers. And they've been to the State Theater before. I think it's been a number of years, but they've been here before. He's equally adept at bluegrass and Bach, has a huge technique, and he's won a MacArthur Award, one of the Genius Grants, as well as multiple Grammys. And he's just an amazing
Now, the
player.
Genius Grant comes with real money, doesn't it?
Some real money, yeah.
Yes, okay, so
Yeah.
we need that kind of thing.
Right.
And we have a clip.
We have a
on
clip
that.
of him playing Bach here. This is the E major prelude.
A Bach on a mandolin.
Yes.
Bill, if we could have that. Again, thank you, Bill. Chris
Thiele. Yep.
mandolin. Dalton Center Recital Hall, October 30th, 8 p.m. And I see, when we come to newspapers, there are the high-class ones and there are the others.
Right.
And the Independent isn't an old newspaper, not like the Times or the Guardian, but
Sure.
it's a good newspaper.
Very well respected. Yeah.
Very well respected. And they described Chris
Thiele.
Thiele
Mm-hmm.
as the most remarkable mandolinist in
In
the world.
Right.
Coming to Kalamazoo on the 30th of October
Right.
at a very reasonable cost.
Right.
Thank you again. Moving right along. Emmanuel, no, before we move on,
Sure.
uniting, back to that theme. Crybaby
Yes.
concerts. That's still going on?
It is, yeah. We generally do one every month. Every so often we'll take a month off if it's, like January or August or something like that. But generally we do one a month. The next one is April 18th, Saturday, April 18th, and that's taking place at the Kalamazoo Public Library, the Central Branch.
And there they have this children's area, of course.
Correct.
Oh, they also have the big,
It's upstairs, in that
Upstairs,
big space.
the big
yeah.
room.
We have this group coming down, two brothers coming down from Ann Arbor. They're called Gemini, and they specialize in programs for kids, and they do just an amazing, terrific job with just engaging the kids and getting them active, participating, as well as educating about music in general.
Yes.
So
and these are free conference.
they are. They're all free. They're Saturday mornings at 11 a.m.
So 11 a.m. The next one is the date?
April 18th.
April 18th,
Yes.
not far
Saturday,
away.
yeah.
and in the public library.
Yep, and you can just show up, you don't need to make any reservations or anything, everything's free, and it's just a really nice environment. It's totally non-judgmental. You know, if the kids cry, they cry.
Yes.
If they run around or want to dance to the music, that's strongly encouraged. And, you know, the parents can just, we have everything from 2-month-olds to 6-year-olds, and, you know, everyone's welcome, and it's really a nice
I
environment.
believe you even have diaper changing stations.
We do.
So
It's very
a man or a
family-friendly.
woman, I mean, there are single parents
Right,
who now have to look after these kids.
sure.
And here's a chance for them to go out and compare
Yep.
other parents'
How the kids are
maladies
to others.
and have the kids with them and they're
Right.
safe.
Right.
It's a break. It's tough
Yep.
raising these
I'm
little
sure.
ones.
I'm sure.
And a little bit of culture thrown in, even if the kids don't understand it,
Can't hurt.
it can't hurt,
Got to
can
start somewhere,
it?
right?
It does something. Those little minds will sign up as,
Oh, yeah.
maybe become board members of Fontana one day.
Who knows? We're recruiting
May
early.
you live to see it. Let's move on again because we're going to be all right. I talk too much and time flies by, and I enjoy every minute of it. I hope
I do too.
you're enjoying it as well. Emmanuel
Pahoud.
Bahoud.
So he's a former client
I'm
of
glad
mine,
you're
actually.
here.
Yeah, no, he's a former client of mine, actually. He's the principal flute of the Berlin Philharmonic, which is a very prestigious thing to be.
Oh, yes.
He was also the youngest principal ever that the Berlin Philharmonic hired 20 years ago, I guess now. If you talk to any flutist, I mean, we've already seen in terms of the rush of ticket sales for this particular concert, these flute players come out of the woodwork for him. He really is considered, you know, the best. He's sort of this generation's James Galway. And here he's paired with a wonderful guitarist, Christian Rivet, and it's a very interesting program. They're performing works off of a CD that they just released about 6 months ago called Around the World. And it's a real eclectic mix of repertoire spanning over 400 years. So there's very modern stuff, there's very old stuff, there's a lot of stuff in between. And this particular clip that we're going to hear today is a Bartók Romanian dance.
A Bartók with some melody in it.
It is Bartók with melody. That's why I chose this one. Let's see how
How
challenging
melodious.
you think this Bartók
Okay.
is.
Bill, thank you for the video. I think when are you willing to rank orchestras? The Berlin Philharmonic is,
They're in
Pretty well
the
up
very
there.
top, the very, very top tier.
yes.
You know, it's difficult with the Vienna Philharmonic and the Berlin Philharmonic and London Symphony and New York Philharmonic, but they're certainly on anyone's list, you know, in the very top 3, I would imagine.
I worked Scandinavia and Austria and Germany
Right.
with Upjohn when I was living in
Oh,
Belgium.
okay.
And one of our staff in Heppenheim, which is where we had our Upjohn office,
Right.
his father was a long-time member of the Berlin
Oh,
Philharmonic.
wow,
and his son was in awe of his father.
I bet.
And they hold on to their people.
They
They don't
do.
have a lot of turnover in that
The
orchestra.
Vienna Philharmonic is very similar to that, and a lot of their sons will, in Vienna, for instance, I know that
Oh,
the
yes.
former, most recent president of the orchestra, his son is now in the orchestra, and so they bring them up, and that's just their upbringing.
Yes, and they now have women in the Vienna.
They do, mercifully, yes, it's
Yes.
about time.
Yes, it's the same orchestra, I think, plays in the Opera House
It is,
and
yeah,
in the,
Vienna Philharmonic.
yes,
Yeah,
there's good stuff out there.
yeah, wonderful stuff.
And you're bringing these people into little old Kalamazoo.
Thanks, yeah.
It's a privilege.
It's
really
great,
is.
I'm glad that we can do it.
Yes, but you get close to these people, you can see the perfection, you can see the dedication, you can see I want you to understand this music.
Sure.
It's there.
Yep,
It's an education for people like me anyway.
right.
I get as much as I can. Okay, that was is it flutist or flautist?
Flutist, I think
Flutist?
flautist was sort of a
Flautist is gone?
70s, 80s thing, and then I
Yeah,
think
my
we changed
peak
over
period.
to flutist. I'm guessing we changed over to flutist sometime in the 90s, I'm not sure.
Okay, so we shouldn't shout out flautist.
Right.
It's out of time. Time for three, Friday, February the 26th. Jimmy, we're back in winter.
Yes,
Okay, but something good to look forward to.
yes.
Despite the
Something
sub-zero
warm and fun
temperatures.
to look forward to in
Hopefully
in
a milder
February.
winter next year.
Right.
Friday, February the 26th, 2016, 8 p.m., Dalton Center Recital Hall. Most of this, you say, is taking place this season.
5 of the 8 concerts
Five
are
of the
in
8 will be in
Yeah,
Dalton Center,
right.
which is good. I mean, I think the
I think
acoustics
it's perfect
there are...
size, it's a
Yes.
perfect acoustic,
Yes.
it's really accessible, having the parking right there, and, so it really,
Yes.
it's ideal in many ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've talked before when discussing music. There's that fourth wall, that they're playing and they could be behind plate glass, but they're not.
Right,
And you get so close, you can affect the performance
yes,
by, your enthusiasm or lack of it
yes.
can really affect the performance. It's something special about it. And Dalton's not so big that you
No,
really
it's like
can.
500 people or
Oh.
something like that, so it really does feel quite intimate, and
Yes,
you really
yes,
do feel
yes,
like you
yes.
can be a part of the
So
experience.
Dalton Center, February the 26th, 8 p.m. And Time for Three. Tell us a little bit about Time for Three. Bill has them on the screen already.
Right, so
There
this
are
is
three of them.
This is a great group. They hail from my alma mater, the Curtis Institute. So here again, we're coming into this thing where you have these musicians that are steeped in classical music, and that's their training, that's their background. In fact, the first violinist is also the concertmaster of the Indianapolis Symphony, so he plays classical music all the time. These guys, when they were in college, so they were 10 years after me, so they were in, like, say, the late 90s, early 2000s at Curtis. They formed together and created what they self-describe as a garage band. A classical
garage
yes,
band.
Exactly.
It's a garage
Classical
band.
music.
Garage.
Classical music garage band.
Flutists, you got. I'm
Right.
going to stick to garage.
Right. Okay, we'll stick with garage. And they all came, so like I said, they were all steeped in classical training, but they all had extra interests before they came to Curtis. So one of them was from, the jazz, also enjoyed the jazz world, the other enjoyed the bluegrass world or whatever, and they kind of taught each other all of this stuff. And now they do this eclectic mix of all of these things. And they're just a really fascinating group, and they also write some of their own music, and they perform very traditional stuff, very modern stuff. They're sort of all over the spectrum, but they're just equally good at what they do because they are trained and they really know their stuff really well. So this is an example. This is called Banjo Love, which the bassist that you'll see performing on this clip wrote for the group.
Bill, in your hands again. Video, please. they were having fun.
That they definitely were. They always do.
Well,
That's
they're
the
entitled to
kind-
have fun, aren't they? They've done the hard work,
Right.
and if they can't have fun,
What's the point?
what's the point? And they work. I'm trying to remember names. I got one of those big laser discs. The Trout
Right.
played in the Festival Hall in London.
Okay.
Barenboim at piano,
Sure.
Zubin Mehta on
Bass.
bass.
Jacqueline Dupre on cello.
So she was married to
At the time.
Barenboim at the time.
Correct.
She died young.
Yes.
Saw her with the Halle Orchestra
Okay.
in Manchester.
Oh,
Met her
wow.
at a
I
mingling
never got to hear her
afterwards.
live. Wow.
Quite a lady.
Yeah.
And the violist,
Was it Pinchas Zuckerman? No, Jamie Laredo. I think it was
Okay.
Jamie Laredo.
but it was amazing. But the video of it, they saw them arriving
Okay.
in London
Right.
and saw them rehearsing, and they were having fun.
Yeah.
At one point, I think Zubin Mehta gave one of the others his bow, and
Okay.
he fingered and the other.
Right.
And just before he finished, the guy just kissed him on the cheek,
Nice.
having fun.
Sure.
You've earned the right to have
Right,
fun
right.
when you've done all the
The
discipline
hard
study.
work. Yeah.
And they seem to be coming across with those three there.
Yeah. No, very dynamic group.
It's a fun group.
Yep.
And that it will be 26th of February, Dalton Centre Recital Hall, 8 p.m. People don't have to book for the whole season. They can have a package.
They can have a
They can
package.
book-
They can do individual concerts.
Yes,
Yeah. There are
they
any
can
number
do-
of kind of
yes.
permutations. That
And these leaflets that I'm looking at
Yes.
in the foyer here of the
All over
Epic
the
Centre.
building. Yeah.
All over. So people can pick one up.
Yes.
You don't have to listen to somebody with the Yorkshire accent spelling it out for them. Miro Quartet with Colin Curry.
We have Juilliard's first.
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
Sure.
The Juilliard String Quartet. Friday, March 18th to 16 at 8 p.m. Stetson Chapel
Yes.
at Kalamazoo College. People need to note that if they go to the wrong place, they're going to miss a lot of the
Right.
action.
Right.
So some variation.
We've been lucky with that, considering how many different venues we work in. We've been very lucky with getting that messaging out there as
Yes.
to where we're going to be.
So tell us a bit about the Juilliard
Well,
String Quartet.
they
We've
need
got
little-
6 or 7 minutes.
yeah, they probably need little introduction. They are considered sort of the quintessentially American string quartet. They've been together almost 70 years in different permutations, but always anchored to the Juilliard School in Manhattan. They're a terrific group, and I'm excited. They're going to be playing Mozart, Debussy, and a new work that's currently being written, by a composer by the last name of Wernick.
So I won't ask you to hum it to us because it's still being written.
Couldn't even tell you, yeah.
Okay. Bill, video if we could. Waving my arm so that Bill could see, and now I'm on television waving my
Right.
arm. But I am excited.
Right?
Good stuff coming along.
Yes.
Now, Miro or Miro?
Miro.
Miro Quartet, Colin Curry, percussion. Saturday, April 16th, next year, 8 p.m., Dalton Centre Recital Hall. Maybe we should go straight to the clip because we're desperately running out of time.
Yeah, this clip is unfortunately not a great example because it's just the quartet. There's no clip that exists with them as a duo, but this at least will give you an idea of some of the stuff that the Miro playing on their own.
So just give us a few seconds of the Miro Quartet video, if you would.
Exploring the Opus 59 quartets by Beethoven has been a tremendous journey for them.
We are really running out of time,
Right.
but we do need to mention the last of the season, next season's Thursday, May 12th.
And this is the Taylor Eichste Trio. This is a collaboration that we're doing with the Gilmore International Keyboard Festival. And this
Okay.
is going to be held at Bell's Eccentric Cafe downtown.
Brings us back to the very beginning where
Yes.
we come from grand halls, chamber
Sure.
halls to
Now we're in a
Bell's
bar.
Eccentric Cafe with perhaps some bells
Sure.
in the meantime.
Libations, yes. of
Okay.
course.
And no ice cream. Ice cream is the summer
No, yeah,
concert.
exactly.
But maybe a little beer
Sure.
in that one. Taylor
Eichste.
Eichste.
Yep.
I hope you're going to say this from the stage to help the whole audience pronounce
I'll
it
be sure to, yes.
when you introduce them. Just a clip, maybe play us out